5 ancient lessons that quietly make you unforgettable to any woman. Most men think connection begins with the right words, a clever line, a confident gesture, a certain image they have to project. But the Stoics would tell you something far simpler. Connection begins with presence. Presence means being fully where you are, not lost in self-doubt, not trying to calculate the next move, not performing to earn approval. It's a quiet strength that speaks louder than any compliment ever could. In this first chapter, the narrator reflects on how he used to approach women with nervous energy, always trying to appear interesting, always overthinking. Conversations felt like battles to win rather than moments to experience. Then, through Stoic reflection, he realized that this mindset came from fear, the fear of rejection, the fear of not being enough. He began to practice stillness, learning to pause before speaking, to truly listen, and to hold eye contact not to impress, but to understand. In those moments, something subtle changed. He noticed that when he was calm, women opened up more easily. When he stopped chasing connection, it started to find him naturally. The Stoic lesson here is from Marcus Aurelius. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If your thoughts are anxious, your energy feels scattered. But if your thoughts are calm, your presence feels grounded, and that's what women sense first. In this part, the story shows a scene of quiet connection, perhaps sitting beside a woman at a cafe, their conversation unhurried, their silences comfortable. The focus isn't on what he says, but on the peace he brings into that moment. By the end of part 1, he realizes that attraction isn't something you manufacture, it's something that grows naturally when you're present, authentic, and emotionally still. The goal is no longer to get her attention, but to give your full attention. Because real connection begins when performance ends. Connection isn't built through intensity, it's built through consistency. A Stoic man knows that emotions are natural, but reactions are a choice. Women don't feel safe with men who lose themselves in every mood swing, every spark of insecurity, or every silent doubt. They trust a man who can stay calm when feelings rise. In this chapter, the narrator recalls a moment when he almost let his emotions undo a fragile connection. He had been seeing a woman who was kind but guarded, someone who had learned to protect her heart. One evening, she grew distant, replying slower, her warmth fading behind polite smiles. The old version of him would have panicked, texted more, overthought, tried to fix the distance. But this time, he remembered Epictetus' teaching. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. So instead of chasing reassurance, he chose stillness. He gave her space, kept his tone gentle, and trusted the truth of their bond instead of the noise of his mind. A few days later, she reached out, not because he demanded attention, but because his calm gave her the safety to return on her own. That was the moment he understood that emotional control isn't suppression, it's mastery. It's the quiet message that says, "You can trust me to stay steady, even when things feel uncertain." This part's atmosphere feels warm and restrained, maybe a soft rain outside, his reflection in the window, a quiet evening where he writes in his journal instead of reacting in haste. The lesson unfolds not through speeches, but through still behavior, his silence, his patience, his restraint. By the end of part 2, he realizes that women don't fall for perfection, they fall for peace. When a man can regulate his emotions, he becomes an anchor in a world full of chaos. That calm, stoic steadiness isn't cold, it's comforting. It says, "No matter what happens, I'll stay grounded, and you can too." Love that lasts is never built on possession, it's built on respect. The Stoics understood that attachment born from fear only leads to suffering. To truly connect with a woman, you must see her not as someone to hold, but as someone to understand, a soul free to choose, to stay, to walk away, to be herself. The narrator reflects on how, in the past, he confused care with control. He'd check in too often, worry if she didn't reply, feel uneasy when she spent time alone. It wasn't jealousy in its loudest form, it was subtle, disguised as concern. But underneath, it was the desire to be reassured, to feel secure through her actions instead of his own inner peace. Then he came across a line from Seneca. "He who is brave is free." And he realized, real love demands bravery. the courage to give space, the strength to trust someone's choices, even when you can't predict the outcome. In this chapter, we see him put that lesson into practice. One evening, she mentions needing time alone, a weekend to think, to breathe. The younger version of him would have taken it personally. But now, he simply nods, smiles softly, and says, "Take all the time you need." Inside, he feels a quiet ache, but it's mixed with respect. During her absence, he doesn't spiral. He focuses on his own growth, reading, reflecting, journaling. He learns that love without freedom becomes dependence, and dependence kills the very energy that makes connection meaningful. When she returns, something shifts. There's no tension, no guilt, just warmth. She tells him she feels lighter, and trusts him more because he didn't try to control her space. By the end of part 3, he understands that the deepest form of connection isn't built through constant closeness, but through mutual respect. When you honor her freedom, she feels safe, not because you hold on tightly, but because you let go gently. One of the hardest lessons for any man to learn is that listening is not the same as solving. Most men are wired to repair, to fix, to make things right. But connection isn't born from solutions, it's born from understanding. A Stoic man knows that the strength of his presence lies not in the advice he gives, but in the peace he brings. The narrator remembers an evening when the woman he cared for came to him visibly tired, her voice low, her shoulders tense. She started talking about her day, the people who had frustrated her, the quiet exhaustion behind her smile. Instinctively, he wanted to help. He had a dozen answers ready, logical, practical, all meant to ease her burden. But something inside him told him to stop. He remembered a line from Marcus Aurelius: "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." So he stayed silent. He simply listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't analyze. He just looked into her eyes, nodded occasionally, and let her words exist without judgment. As she spoke, he noticed her breathing slow down. Her posture softened. The tension faded, not because he fixed her problem, but because she finally felt seen. For the first time, he understood that sometimes, what a woman needs isn't your answers, it's your stillness. The Stoic lesson here is simple. Wisdom isn't about having the right response, it's about creating the right space. Listening without trying to control the outcome teaches patience, empathy, and restraint. It's emotional discipline in its quietest form. Later that night, as they sat in calm silence, she whispered, "Thank you for not trying to fix me." That moment stayed with him, the realization that peace often speaks louder than advice. By the end of part 4, he learns that true emotional connection is built when she feels safe enough to be imperfect. A man who listens without judgment becomes a mirror, not to her flaws, but to her humanity. And that's where real trust begins. Words can inspire, but actions build trust. The Stoics believe that virtue is shown through conduct, not promises. A man's calm consistency speaks louder than declarations of loyalty or affection ever could. Real connection isn't proven in what you say when things are easy, it's in what you do when things get hard. The narrator recalls a time when the woman he cared for was quietly testing his steadiness, not intentionally, but through life itself. She was overwhelmed with work, distant in tone, her world spinning faster than usual. Many men would have felt unappreciated or withdrawn to protect their ego. But he reminded himself of a teaching by Epictetus. Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. So instead of explaining how much he cared, he showed it. He checked in without hovering. He brought her a cup of coffee when she least expected it, left kind notes when she seemed drained, and respected her silence without taking it personally. He didn't rush her to reciprocate, he stayed steady. His quiet actions carried the message his words never needed to. In one scene, she comes home late, exhausted, frustrated. He doesn't try to cheer her up with clichés. He simply takes her bag, pours her a glass of water, and sits beside her without speaking. She looks at him, a faint smile forming. That's when she realizes, he's not just present when it's convenient, he's grounded when it matters most. This part's tone is peaceful yet deeply emotional, the kind of warmth that grows from quiet reliability. Through him, the audience sees that being stoic doesn't mean being distant. It means being dependable, patient, and gentle with strength. By the end of part 5, he understands that actions are the truest form of affection. Words can make her feel wanted, but actions make her feel safe. And when a woman feels safe in your presence, love stops being something you chase. It becomes something you live. Detachment is often misunderstood. To many, it sounds like coldness or emotional distance, but to the Stoics, detachment meant freedom. It's not about caring less, it's about not being controlled by what you care about. In love, this balance is everything. A man who clings too tightly loses himself, but a man who detaches wisely becomes a calm presence that draws others in. The narrator remembers a time when the woman he was close to began to pull away again, not out of anger, but out of her own confusion. She needed space, clarity, maybe even solitude. A part of him wanted to chase, to ask what went wrong, to demand reassurance. But he remembered the Stoic principle. You have power over your mind, not outside events. So, he chose quiet acceptance over emotional pursuit. He let her step back, not because he didn't care, but because he respected her process. Each day, he reminded himself, her distance is not a rejection, it's a reflection of where she is, not who I am. Instead of filling the silence with fear, he filled it with purpose, exercise, journaling, work, reflection. And in that stillness, something shifted. The ache remained, but it didn't consume him. His calm energy became his anchor. Weeks later, when she reached out again, she found the same steady man, unchanged, unbitter, open. That quiet steadiness spoke more than any desperate message ever could. This part's atmosphere feels reflective. Late nights, soft music, the glow of city lights through a window. It's the tone of emotional maturity, of someone learning to let go without closing his heart. By the end of part 6, he learns that Stoic detachment isn't about emotional withdrawal, it's about emotional strength. To love without possession, to care without demand, to give without fear of loss, that's what makes love peaceful, not painful. When you master detachment, you don't lose passion, you purify it. In the final lesson, everything he's learned comes together: presence, control, respect, patience, and detachment. Each principle has shaped him into a man who no longer seeks connection to fill a void, but to share peace. The Stoics taught that true freedom comes when love is a conscious choice, not a desperate need. The narrator reflects on how different he feels now. In the past, love was something he chased, a source of validation, a way to prove his worth. But through the calm discipline of Stoic living, he's discovered that genuine love doesn't begin with desire, it begins with wholeness. He doesn't need someone to make him feel complete. He chooses to love because it expands who he already is. The final scene unfolds in quiet simplicity. A morning walk along the coast or a peaceful park at sunset. She's beside him again, calm and present. Their bond feels different now, not born from longing, but from understanding. There's no pressure, no uncertainty, only mutual respect and calm affection. They pause, watching the light shift across the horizon. She turns to him and says softly, "You've changed." He smiles, not proudly, but peacefully. "No," he replies. "I just stopped trying to control what was never mine to own." The Stoic lesson here echoes Marcus Aurelius. Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart. By the end of part 7, the story closes with emotional resolution, not a dramatic confession, but a quiet truth: love is strongest when it's free. The narrator has become the kind of man who gives without expectation, listens without judgment, and loves without fear. He no longer measures connection by how long it lasts, but by how deeply it shapes the soul. Because when love is chosen, not needed, it becomes eternal in its own calm, Stoic way.